When you think about American history, it's easy to imagine this grand, inevitable march to power. But that's not really how it happened. The real story of how this nation became the most powerful on Earth, it's way messier. It's a tale of accidents, of bitter rivalries, and honestly, some just plain dumb luck. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on that story. Let's get into it.
So, get this. For the first 100 years after Columbus, North America was basically a giant afterthought. All the action, all the gold, all the glory, that was happening in Central and South America. Spain and Portugal were hitting the jackpot with the Aztec and Incan empires. But North America, it was just seen as this cold, empty wilderness, kind of like the consolation prize of the New World.
So that's the big question, right? How does a place go from being the world's biggest backwater to its undisputed heavyweight champion? Well, that's what we're going to unpack. And trust me, the answer is a wild ride full of epic rivalries, bloody revolutions, and some twists of fate that you just couldn't make up. Okay, so eventually, the other European powers started getting a serious case of FOMO. They saw Spain getting rich and decided, hey, we want a piece of that. So they turned their gaze to North America, not really for gold, but for other stuff. And that kicked off this massive, chaotic scramble for land. The continent was officially up for grabs. And this is where things get really interesting, because everybody wanted something different. You had Spain, still hunting for gold and trying to convert the native population. Then you had France, who wanted to build this massive fur trading empire right down the middle of the continent. But England, their plan was totally different. They wanted to plant people. They wanted to build a new society from the ground up. And that ambition, right there, set the stage for a massive showdown.
And, well, a showdown is exactly what they got. The future of North America really came down to this brutal winner-take-all fight between Britain and France. And honestly, it wasn't even a fair fight. France had maybe 60,000 colonists spread out over a huge area. The British colonies, they had over 1 million people. It was like a demographic tidal wave. The French were completely swamped, and their dream of a North American empire just washed away. But here's the ironic twist. Britain's greatest victory actually planted the seeds for its biggest defeat. By winning control of North America, they accidentally kicked off a chain reaction that would lead to them losing their most valuable colonies. The birth of a brand new nation was just around the corner, and it was a direct result of Britain's own success.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. First, the war was incredibly expensive. So Britain turns to the colonies and says, hey, you should probably help foot the bill. But the colonists, they were not having it. Their rallying cry became no taxation without representation. They weren't about to pay taxes to a government an entire ocean away where they had no voice, no vote, no say at all. And that one simple, powerful idea, it lit the fuse for the American Revolution.
So they won. Hooray, right? Well, not so fast. Their first crack at a government was a complete and utter disaster. Each of the 13 states was acting like its own little country. They had their own money, their own armies. It was total chaos. This grand American experiment was on the verge of collapsing before it even got off the ground.
And that's when they came up with the U.S. Constitution. Now, this wasn't just some document. It was a radical solution. It created a strong central government that could actually unite all these bickering states. It was a huge gamble, but man, did it pay off. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of a nation that for the first time actually had a fighting chance. All right, so with a solid government in place, America was ready to grow. And I mean, really grow. The 19th century was just this whirlwind of expansion, this mad dash to claim an entire continent. And as we're about to see, it happened through a wild mix of smart deals, brutal wars, and just unbelievable luck. $15 million. That works out to about 4 cents an acre. For that bargain basement price, the United States literally doubled in size overnight. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't just a good deal. It was probably the greatest real estate deal in all of human history. It completely changed the destiny of the country. And who can we thank for this incredible bargain? Napoleon Bonaparte. He was getting ready for a massive war with Britain, and he needed cash fast. So he sold off France's enormous North American territory for practically nothing. So once again, a conflict over in Europe had this huge, unexpected consequence for America's future. And the expansion didn't stop there. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's insane. In just over 30 years, the U.S. goes from a nation on the East Coast to a continental empire. Florida gets bought from Spain. Texas is annexed. The entire Southwest is added after a war with Mexico. And the Oregon Territory is secured from Britain.
It was just this breathtakingly fast expansion, and it all happened within a single generation. But all of this rapid growth created a huge problem. With every new piece of territory, this one burning question came up again and again. Would it allow slavery, or would it be free? And that single issue was like a deep crack running through the foundation of the country, and it was about to tear the whole house apart. America was heading straight for its greatest crisis. At the heart of it all was slavery. In the North, where industry was growing, it was seen more and more as this profound moral evil, a stain on the nation. But in the South, where the economy was built on agriculture, it was everything. It was the system they were willing to defend no matter the cost. You basically had two Americas, with two totally different visions for the future, on a collision course. And the spark that finally lit the powder keg? The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. The Southern states saw him as a radical who was dead set on destroying their entire way of life. For them, there was only one option left: to leave the Union. One by one, they seceded, and the country plunged into a horrifying civil war. The Civil War was an absolute bloodbath, the deadliest war in American history. But after 4 brutal years, the North won. The nation was violently forced back together, and 4 million enslaved people were finally freed. The United States survived, but the scars from that war would run deep for generations to come. From the ashes of that war, a new America was born. It was more unified, more industrial, and way more powerful. And now that the continent was pretty much settled, this new America started to look outward, beyond its own borders. The era of American isolation was officially coming to an end. And what was one of its first big moves on the world stage? You guessed it, another unbelievable real estate deal. The U.S. bought Alaska from Russia for about 2 cents an acre. At the time, people thought it was a huge joke. They called it Seward's Folly, this pointless purchase of a giant block of ice. Of course, when gold was discovered there a few decades later, it became one of the smartest buys in history. You know, this deal kicked off a huge debate that would really define the next 100 years of foreign policy. The big question was, should America just stay in its corner and mind its own business, or should it get involved around the globe to protect its own interests? The whole situation with Hawaii brought this to a boiling point. American businessmen had overthrown the Queen, so should the U.S. step in and annex the islands? It was a real showdown between old-school isolationism and this new, ambitious global power. Well, that debate was pretty much settled in 1898. The Spanish-American War was short, it was decisive, and it announced America's arrival as a major player. One diplomat called it a splendid little war. And just like that, after a few short months, the U.S. had itself a global empire, with territories stretching all the way from the Caribbean to the Pacific. And then came the crown jewel of this new American power, the Panama Canal. This was Teddy Roosevelt's baby. It was this massive feat of engineering that completely changed global trade and military strategy. By connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific, the U.S. Navy suddenly had a massive shortcut. It was a clear, bold statement to the rest of the world. America is here, and we're not going anywhere. So there you have it. In a little over a century, America goes from a continental afterthought to a global powerhouse. But by 1914, with World War I looming on the horizon, the really big question was just starting to be asked. What kind of power was America going to be? Would it be a reluctant giant, or would it be an eager empire? The answer to that question would end up shaping the entire world as we know it today.